Hey, 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 it's Wolang Wednesday. Welcome, teachers, to another class all about curriculum. We're here in the curriculum series, and I am so glad that you are here live with me. Put in the comments below where you are watching from and what did you teach today? I'm really excited to hear about it. If you are new around these parts, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really glad to be here with you. My name is Devin, and I like to hang out with French, Spanish, and all world language teachers, especially middle and high school teachers, if that's your thing, to talk about all things curriculum, lesson creations, and all that good stuff. But we have a really special class today because we're going to be talking about something really near and dear to my heart, which is level 2 curriculums, because this is where things get really cool in the world of world language. But it is also a place where we can sometimes get tripped up by our own expectations of what we think students should be doing and what we as teachers think we should be teaching. So I'm really excited to get into today with you some ideas on where it's very common to kind of trip yourself up, especially if you're creating your own curriculum as a proud department of one, or if you're working with something like you're maybe using the skeleton of a textbook to work with your curriculum, or you are working with a department curriculum or anything along those lines, all are welcome here today. So welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's get this party started. Y'all, I'm so excited that you are here with me today. Let me check and make sure that everything is looking good and that it is working well. And let me know in the comments below that you can hear me, and let's get rolling. I'm going to go ahead and here and share my screen so that we can jump right into it. All right, so I'm going to be asking you a question today. So make sure that you have an answer ready for me. Are you ready? Here is the question. What is hard about teaching level 2? What's especially hard about being a French 2 teacher, about being a Spanish 2 teacher, Chinese 2 teacher, German 2, Italian 2, Russian 2? What's especially hard about being that level 2 teacher? What's different about it that you don't really see in level 1 or level 3 or level 4? What's different about being a level 2 teacher? Let me know in the comments below what you think. All right, cool. Looks like we are good. Yeah. All right, here we go. I'm opening this up so I can make sure I can see everything. Hey, y'all. Thanks for watching. Hi, Madison. I'm so glad you're here. All right. I am going to share my screen while y'all are thinking about what we are doing. Okay, so let me change around some things here. Just chill for a minute as I'm doing my thing. All right, yeah, Zoom. Okay, let's go here. Shift. Okay, let's see. Hi, what did you teach today, Madison? How was your day? All right, let me see if this is sharing correctly. You should be able to see. Oh, you're getting a sneak peek into what we're going to look at later. All right, but we're going to be looking at something that is on Canva today. So it should be orange. All right, cool. Yay, we're good. All right, here we go. Guys, we are in the spring curriculum series. Let's go. It's Wolang Wednesday. How you feeling? I'm feeling good. All right, so we are here in the level 2 curriculum missteps and what to do instead. Reminder, I have a reminder for you. We hang out every Wednesday to do this. So if you're into this and you would love to see what we talked about for level 1, and if you would love to see what we talked about can-do statements last week, which was oh so good. And we have a whole other host of topics that we're doing. This is a 12 series class this whole spring. Oh, spring just feels so good. I've got the windows open and the air is fresh and breezy and glorious. It's a great day. It's a great day to be talking about curriculum. But go ahead to lalibrelanguagelelearning.com/Wednesday to get the full scoop, to get the full schedule. That's where you'll find it all. So tell me, again, do you have your answer now? What's hard about teaching level 2? What do you find hard about teaching level 2? And while you're putting your answer in the comments below, and for my replay friends, hi replay friends, make sure that you put in the comments if you're watching on the replay. I got an email this morning actually from someone who said, thanks so much for offering this class. I can't make the times, but I'm excited that I'll be able to watch the replay. Of course, friend. Of course you can always watch the replays. That's what they're for. You will always be able to catch this replay either on the Facebook page or on my YouTube page. So if you are one of my friends watching on the replay, you're always welcome. How's the future? I hope it's great. Tell us. Tell me what's hard about teaching level 2. Whether you are live or on the replay, I'll tell you what my answer is. When I was still in the classroom, what was really hard for me about teaching level 2 is that I had this expectation that my students would be at the next level, that they would no longer be beginners. But that was never really the case. That was hard. That was really hard because they were kind of in betweensies. They're still beginners, but they've barely really gotten their feet wet when it comes to language. I always assumed, and so did really all of the other teachers that I worked with as well, that they had more language in their heads than they actually did. So that's something that we're going to talk about being a level 2 teacher. That's one of the hardest parts. You want to, as a level 1 teacher, I feel like, let me know if you feel me on this. I always felt as a level 2 teacher that you want to take that deep breath of being like, yes, I'm not responsible for making sure that they know all the ropes. They finally got a little bit of experience. Like, we can start to move fast now. We can really start to get into the good stuff now. But that's honestly not really the experience that I ever had teaching level 2. My students were never really ready to ramp up. They were never ready for that. They were never ready to go as fast as I quote unquote wanted to in level 2. And that was hard to keep in check my expectations just because they were at level 2. Because honestly, like, what do levels really even mean? Levels are, if we're being honest, kind of trash in the whole teaching landscape that we're in right now, especially with the pandemic. It doesn't really mean that much. So being a level 2 teacher, I thought was a lot harder than being a level 1 teacher because you are assuming that you're teaching at this whole different level and you've got this whole new curriculum that's different from your level 1, but your students they're kind of level 1.5, really. That was hard about for me. All right, let me see what we got in here. We got Megan. Hi, Megan. Hi, Deborah. Thanks for joining me. Megan says, I agree. It seems like I really step up to the curriculum in 2 and kids struggle to keep up with upgraded expectations. Yeah. And I don't think that it has anything to do with the students, right? It's just that we overestimate, I think, collectively as teachers, how much time students are in our class. I really think that's the heart of the problem, is that we believe a whole year of instruction has gone by. That's what it sounds like, right? But honestly, if you look at the contact hours, when I was teaching block 90 minutes, they were in my classroom for maybe 80 class periods, maybe 75. And that's honestly not that many contact hours. You need, according to different estimates, depending on who you talk to and what study you're reading and all that good stuff. But the latest one that I heard when I was teaching a class with, if you know Bertha Delgadillo, who is an absolute rock star, she was telling me that she heard from Bill Van Patten that the latest average that she read was 720 hours in order to even get to novice high. That's a lot of contact hours. That's a lot of contact hours. It's intense. That is what was hard for me about teaching level 2. Another thing that's really hard for me about teaching level 2 was that I was a high school teacher. Yeah, high school for life. And what always happened, especially since I taught block, was that, and I love block. I'm a big proponent of block. Say what you will, put your opinions in here, and we could talk about it. But I enjoyed teaching block. I did. The The reason I liked teaching block is because I thought that students had a lot more opportunities to take more classes. And when I was in high school, I benefited a lot from block. I was able to take 7 APs because of block scheduling. I was able to do a lot with that format. But the huge downside to block, as we know as language teachers, désolé microphone, is that you can have a significant amount of time between your level 1 class and your level 2 class. I would even encounter seniors who hadn't taken a level 1 class in 4 years because of block. So they're basically starting from scratch again. And I mean, math and science teachers have the same problem. When you teach a sequential subject like we do, yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. Okay, so let's get into these missteps. As you are watching here, feel free to think about what you think is hard about teaching level 2 and put it in the comments below. You heard mine. I think, and Megan thinks too, that sometimes we as teachers, we think that we have more time with our students. We ramp up those expectations because of that, but our students are not really ready for that at level 2. So that brings me to what I think is the first. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Which one will do that? Let's try this. Oh, there we go. Is that better? I think that's better. Okay, so mistake number 1 is assuming that your students know more than they do. Surprise, right? Because when you are coming from that viewpoint of they're no longer beginners, we can really start getting into some level 2 goods. We start assuming that they know more than they do. Let me tell you about this horrendous experience I had the first time that I taught level 2. It was level 2 Spanish. And I thought, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show up and prove to my students that Spanish is a very rigorous class. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to review for 2 weeks all of the important points from Spanish 1, especially the difficult grammar points. And then we're going to take a big old review exam on it in 2 weeks. And that is going to show them right away that Spanish 2 is nothing to mess with. They did terribly. I was literally setting them up for failure. It was such a bad idea. I was assuming that they, of course, over the summer didn't forget everything, and B, that they knew a lot more than they actually did. I mean, how could you cram a whole year's worth of material in one exam, especially after a summer break? That's craziness. And that was before I really started getting into my proficiency days, and it was bad. But assuming that my students know more than they do was always something that I struggled with in level 2. So here is something that I suggest you do instead. Approach level 2 like a gradual continuation of level 1. Ernie agrees. Approach level 2 like a gradual continuation of level 1. And see if that takes you to a different place instead, especially if you're in the position, sorry about my dog, especially if you're in the position where you can create your own curriculum or you can make your own curriculum map. If you have the freedom to just move your students along from level 1 to level 2, then you can do a lot with that. Okay. Mistake number 2, I think, is also starting with review. This seems like a really good idea. It does. And I would say, and you can go different ways with this, but I would say that as you are crafting your curriculum for next year, especially with trying to prepare for what on earth is going to be facing us next year in the classroom, because me as a curriculum creator, I'm sweating thinking about what it's going to be like to create a level 1 curriculum, a level 2, and a level 3 curriculum. Everybody's going to be mixed and at such different levels because of just the amount of ups and downs that happened this year with the amount of exposure that students had to language. And you feel that 100 times more than I do, right? Because you were in it. You were in the thick of it this year. So me, I feel it like 2 times, you feel it 100 times, right? So thinking of the idea of starting with review just makes me want to like spit out my guts for level 2. I think that this is going to be a real misstep for next year. And what we should do instead is approach it along the lines of, this is alternative Spanish 1. This is stuff like, think about all of the things that you didn't get to in Spanish 1 that you wish you could have. What if instead you taught a deeper level or maybe a more alternative approach, a more profound approach to things that happen in Spanish 1, these really essential skills of Spanish 1, and you just went all in on them. And maybe even teaching different things and going back throughout the year to recycle in all of that material that you know that students need. Something that I find happens usually is the most essential skills will usually come up throughout the unit or the year as students need them. So for example, we think as level 2 teachers that students need to be absolute masters of the regular present tense and most of their irregulars before that they go to level 2, because they need to know that in order before they go into the past tense. They need to know that before they go into the past tense. But in terms of communicative language, that's really not true. Because if you think about the way a conversation rolls, you don't need to know every single phrase in the past tense in order to use the past tense. Because what happens the most in conversation is you use the second and the third person the most. So I would approach instead teaching a deeper perspective on that second and third person present tense, and just assuming that your students don't remember much of it. And then adding into it a roundabout approach of maybe some more like, let's get into that past tense right away. I think that is a better approach than maybe starting with review. And that is what I will be doing in my own curriculum when I start working on level 2. Okay, mistake number 3. Thinking that this year is the grammar year. How many of you have done this? How many of you have created your curriculums this way or teach in a school that functions like this, or think that this is important? I can't even tell you how many conversations that I have with teachers who say, I can't wait to get to level 2 so that we can really, the students are ready for grammar at that point. Oh my gosh, I used to have conversations with my colleagues all the time that would have this type of tone in the conversation. Who has ever felt like that before? Put it in the comments below if this has happened to you. This is what I mean by this. In level 2 department meetings, often at one of the districts I used to work at, and even when we do like countywide meetings, one of the things we used to talk about all the time was, let's make sure that this happens as the past tense here. Like, okay, it's time for past tense. Can't wait. Students are ready for past tense from day 1 in level 1. They want to use it because they want to talk about what they did over the weekend. They want to talk about what they did yesterday. They want to talk about what they did in the last class. But really, I only use one word. I only use the word did. That's all they really need to know. And then you can move them up from there to a few more vocabulary terms in terms of just making it like vocabulary. It doesn't have to be a whole past tense unit. But what we do a lot of the times in level 2 is we make this the grammar year, and we're going to make this whole year about teaching them everything that they need to know about past tense. Language doesn't work like that, and your students get so overloaded. When you look at the problem that we have with students, I mean, we call it drop off, but I call it students marching with their feet. They're voting with their feet and getting out of world language programs. It's because at level 2, it's all grammar. It's all grammar, and it's all very much this highly structured, symbolic form of language that doesn't really get to the heart of communication. They're not learning skills that gets them further in a communicative capacity. They're learning a lot of linguistic skills, which is incredibly valuable, but it's not valuable in a communicative sense. It's valuable for in a whole different pantheon. It's valuable in a whole different way and for a whole different type of skill sets. So if we're focusing on grammar that much in level 2, like what do they think is going to happen in level 3? They're going to think that that's going to get amped up even more, and then they're not going to sign up for the next class. And something that happens, I think, a lot, especially with world language teachers, is that we think that students are like us. I mean, I don't know. Are you like me? I'm a crazy language nerd. I used to make verb charts for fun in high school because I think they're relaxing. They're very relaxing. It helped me understand language better. It didn't help me speak it better, but it did help me understand language better. And I loved it because I love language. But that's maybe 1% of your students. They don't need that. So focusing so much on grammar in level 2 is, for lack of a better term, it's a major turnoff. It's a major turnoff. And your students as well, they need more hard-hitting activities on reinforcing the communicative skills that you established a foundation for in level 1. So thinking that this is the grammar year, like this is the year that you can get to all those tenses that you've been waiting for, is a misstep. It's a misstep. So here's what to do instead. Go back instead to all of the things that you were setting up for in French 1. What were you doing in French 1? You were setting up a foundation for communicative skills. You were building their lexicon. You were working towards a love, a deep appreciation and understanding of language. And level 2 is just the next step of that. It is not us going in the direction of linguistics. That is a misstep, and that's going to take your students in a different direction and make them feel that language classes are linguistics. And that's not what world language classes are. World language classes are to learn how to use a language. And I think that this comes from mistake number 4, which is trying to trap them with rigor. We do this all the time, and it happens, I think, because in many states, in many circles, world language is treated as an elective. So what we try to do is make sure that students understand, that parents understand, that administrators understand that world language is a difficult subject and it needs to be treated with the respect that it deserves. So we use grammar as our rigor. But if you think about, and I'm going to show you something to help with this, but if you think about what truly communicative interaction really is, I mean, negotiating meaning and context, being able to rearrange familiar and memorized phrases to make them your own original language, that's very high order thinking on Bloom's taxonomy. That's truly rigorous. That's truly rigorous. Memorizing grammar really isn't. Even though it's difficult to memorize those grammar features, it's not actually that rigorous in terms of the use of all of those different things and then testing them on it. So I've made this mistake a million times because I remember how hard it was in order to get all of those language features in my head. But the true rigor, and I know it's easier said than done, but the true rigor really does lie in getting your students to use language in a communicative capacity. Now, this one's my favorite one because I think this is the one where we can really make the most progress in with level 2 learners. Mistake number 5 is really rounding out all the other ones that we've seen before. I'm like really loving this full screen view. I'm real into this. So mistake number 1 is assuming your students know more than they do. Starting with a review, thinking that this year is grammar year, trying to trap them with rigor. Like, I got this phrase from, you ever see the Ali Wong comedy special with Baby Cobra, where she's trying to trap her man, and then she realizes the man really trapped her because he's got a bunch of student debt. So funny. But you try and trap your students with rigor. Mistake number 5 is not assessing their current level, ability, whatever you want to call it, wherever they're at in their current proficiency. Not assessing that. Now, it doesn't mean that you're giving them a test. It just means that you don't have an idea of exactly where they're at. You're just assuming that because they made it to level 2, that they must be at this, this, and this. This is a mistake because your students are probably all over the place. They're probably all over the place for all the reasons that we talked about before. Is really difficult for being a level 2 teacher. but I have a tool for you. You ready for this? This is going to help you out a lot. Now I'm going to have to do some screen switching here for a second in order to get to the tool. You saw a little sneak peek of it earlier, and you'll be able to download it after this class. I'm going to give you a link to it so you can see it. Oh, hi. All right, let me check some comments while I get to the switch in, the switch in, the switch in. All right, so Megan says, I was trained to do that as a student teacher. Totally do things now using CI and pop-up grammar at all levels. Yes, lead in the charge. That is awesome. I love your pop-up grammar. Okay. Jorge says, you're right. Still, what's missing is the theory of language, learned or acquired. I'm working towards a model. Cool, Jorge. Get after it. That's awesome. So what do you mean by what is missing by the theory of language is learned or acquired? Like, tell me more about what you're getting after with what you're talking about with SLA. I would love to know more about that. What is missing is the theory of language is learned or acquired. Are you talking about with teaching students about how language is learned versus how language is acquired? Because that is really valuable too. I started doing that 3 years ago, and that was a game changer. That was definitely a game changer. So let us know. We'd love to know more about that. All right. And also, Megan, tell us more about how you're doing pop-up grammar, because that's very admirable. That's awesome. Okay, let's get into this next thing that I have for you here. So I told you that a lot of these mistakes are very much related to each other in what's going on here. So I've got something to help you with this that I think is really going to help make your level 2 game a lot easier. And I'll give you a link in order to download this after this class. Let me share my screen here so that you can see it. Okay, you ready for this? Let me check and make sure that it's showing properly. It's called the Proficiency gut check. So what I mean by that is when you think about okay, good, it's showing correctly. When you think about your class and where your students are at, I don't know about you, but I always wanted to use the ACTFL tools as much as possible because they're so good. Y'all, they're so good. Make sure that you go and watch the replay for the class that we did last week, all about how to make can-dos a can-do. I said it once, I'll say it a million times. That is absolutely my favorite tool that ACTFL has ever come out with, because I think they are the most learner-friendly and teacher-friendly tool that we have out there. But I will also tell you that something that's hard about some of the ACTFL tools is that because they're designed to be very professional, they're also, they're wordy, and because they're meant to be used for professional level curriculums, right? Now, I am practical. I'm the queen of practical and comprehensible. It's all about everything that I do. So when it came to proficiency, I really wish that I had this when I was in the classroom, because I would have used those proficiency benchmarks much more on a daily basis. So I have something that I hope that you can use. This is how you can quickly assess where your students are at using a formative assessment instead of some sort of giant formal thing. Now, beware that when it comes to doing something like this, ACTFL does warn us that when it comes to can-do statements, that of course, they're not supposed to just be a checklist that you check off and then move on to the next thing. It's not like that, because it is, of course, a learning continuum, and learning is not linear when it comes to language. But I think this is a really easy way that we can check ourselves a little bit, maybe our curriculum, check our students' progress. And for me, I'm using this list right now. I created it to check the curriculum that I'm currently consulting on to make sure that we are hitting all the skills that we need to for novice, mid to high learners, to make sure that there's no gaps in all the activities that this curriculum is offering. I'm also working on a curriculum for a full level 1 offering that's about halfway done. And I'm using this list right now to make sure that I'll know exactly where students are at by the end of the curriculum, that there's enough of these lessons and activities in there. So this is what this list is. It's a quick, paraphrased, simplified version of all the stuff that's in ACTFL, all the things that you probably have tacked on your wall, but you haven't looked at in a while, if you're like me. The performance indicators, the can-do statements, the proficiency benchmarks, all that good stuff. I boiled them down into really simplified paraphrase language. This is not my language. It's all from ACTFL to just check off and make sure that you can see where your students are at and what proficiency level they actually are at when it comes to different skills. So let's take a look at this. This I call the gut check because you can look at this list and say, oh, okay, this is where they're at, this is where they're not at. So there's 12 of them here, really simple. And they're from all 4 of the modes: interpersonal, presentational communication, interpretive communication, and intercultural communication. So they're all of them are in here. So let's look at the first one here. If you are looking at interpretive communication with a text, think about your students in level 2. Your students in level 2 should be reaching for that. They should come to you around a novice mid level and be reaching for novice high. One of the things that we do sometimes assume about level 2 is that they're intermediates. That no, they are novices. They are novices. So thinking about your students in level 2 right now, ask yourself, can your students identify a topic and an element with help from a fictional text? You can also say non-fictional text. Can they, in interpretive mode, understand familiar questions and statements from simple sentences in a conversation? So if your students can understand familiar questions, that means phrases they've seen before. That means familiar topics, simple statements, simple sentences. If they can understand that in a conversation, they're at novice high. Now, this is from a novice high skill as well. This is interpersonal. Can they ask and answer both practiced and original questions on everyday topics? So this isn't things that they've never seen before. It's vocabulary that they're very familiar with, cognates and things that are in their everyday environment, very familiar everyday topics. That whole concept of, oh, she's at it again. So I apologize if we are having some trouble with the sound because I have a very loud dog. But when we're thinking about everyday topics, this will also help you if you're crafting units for level 2, if you're working on that this spring during this series, or if you're working on over the summer, you're working on your curriculum. Everyday topics are things in the everyday environment, things like dogs, or Zoom classes and all that. How about this one? Meeting basic needs and carrying out routine everyday activities. Can your students, this is one that I feel like gets ignored a lot in curriculums because we talk a lot about meeting basic needs in a classroom environment, but can they meet their basic needs like when they're going and talking to anybody who uses that language? Can they meet a basic need like go where they need to go to, get recommendations for going somewhere? Can they figure out if the restaurant has what they need, like especially if they have an allergy or not? That was something that came up a lot when I was studying abroad. That was something that even though I was an intermediate high speaker, I was like, I don't feel ready to meet my basic needs in some of these everyday situations. So that's something that we need to work on in our curriculums too, is meeting basic needs and carrying out routine everyday activities. Okay, this is another good one and another good guider for us. Can your students express, react to, and ask for opinions and feelings? So can they ask for is the part that really makes them novice high, because expressing and reacting to is novice mid. And then when they can ask for opinions and feelings, that gets them to novice high. Something that we often do in Spanish 1, French 1, Chinese 1, all of those beautiful level 1 classes that I love so much. I love level 1. Something that we do that is a misstep in level 1 is we go right for teaching them the questions. It's kind of a novice high skill to ask questions. It is. Being able to ask for opinions and feelings is novice high. Being able to do it well and consistently. Occasionally, does good. Asking questions to keep the conversation on topic. Oof, what a game changer, right? That is where rejoinders really come into the mix. All right, and here's the second list that we got here. This is where we're starting to get into a presentational. Okay, can your students present personal information about their lives and activities? I bet you they can. This is something that usually gets covered pretty quickly. How about this one? Can they talk about opinions and preferences in full sentences most of the time? And then this is where we get to the intercultural ones. Can your students in their own and other cultures Identify common practices of everyday life. So that's where the practices comes in. I love this one. This is such clear-cut language. Can your students interact at a survival level in everyday contexts? Beautifully clear-cut. That's a very simple yes or no, right? Like if you think about your students and their intercultural communication, can they interact at a survival level in everyday contexts? The thing that is different about intercultural communication for can-dos is that there's not really the novice, low, medium, high. It's really just novice, intermediate, and advanced right now. But you can watch that class from last week to see more about those. Can your students identify typical practices of everyday life? And then the last one is, I think probably one of the most useful ones. Can your students use appropriate rehearsed behaviors and recognize inappropriate behaviors in everyday situations? This language should give you a nice sigh of relief that, yes, they can use rehearsed behaviors, sometimes in Spanish too, in French too, in Chinese, German, Russian, all the things. We are expecting our students to use unrehearsed behaviors, and that is a very high expectation for level 2. Anything that you have practiced with them, they should be able to do, they should be able to recognize, especially whether it's appropriate or inappropriate. But anything beyond that is really not in the novice range yet. So it's okay to focus more on language and get into that interacting at a survival level using the language that they are working on. So I will have a link for you at the end of class. If you go to www.lalibrelanguagelearning/check, the word check as in like gut check, you can download this so that you can also do this check with your students and see exactly what level they're at. So what did you think? Which of the missteps is something that you're doing? Which of the missteps is something that you were surprised by? I've done all of them. I've done all of them. That's how I know what the missteps are. I've been a level 2 teacher the whole time that I was in the classroom. I was a level 2 teacher, and I've done all of those missteps. My biggest one, I would say, is not knowing what levels my students were at and then trying to trap them with rigor. Those were the two that I used to do the most. So those are the ones that I'm moving away from the most. I'm not in the classroom anymore, but as a curriculum creator now, trying to help out level 2 teachers, that is something that I'm moving away from and moving more towards a continuation of a beginner curriculum, an introduction to language that where students are ready to go deeper with foundational skills, but not at all in the sense of we're trying to force rigor on people in a way that's inauthentic to how language actually works. That's where I'm moving towards. So let me know what you think in the comments. What are some things that you know that you're doing that you would like to do less of? And I hope that you found this class really useful. We're going to wrap it up here so that you can go and download this here. I'm going to put it in the comments right here. Go to La Libre Language Learning.com/check. And you can download this gut check that we just went over here to help you with your proficiency gut check in your classroom if you're teaching novice, mid to high learners. It also works well for level 1, but this is how you can quickly evaluate to see where your level 2s are at. So what's next? Y'all come and join me next week. We got another class next week. I hope to see you there, and I hope that you learned something today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the flip side next Wednesday, as always. Bye.